going on, guys? Zedd here, bringing you another Marvel Midnight Suns video, and this one will be my presumably final vanilla tier list, as Season Pass number 1 is done. They've made no suggestions or implications that there would be any further balancing or content coming to the game, so I'm just assuming that if this was the last iteration of the game we're playing, this will be the list that I have, and I'm gonna be happy with it. The only balance changes we've had in the game, just so that you're in the loop, is balance collar was nerfed from 3 card or power card plays down to 4. This was to prevent infinite looping with free deadly ground and wrath. And then the other balance change we had was hex charge plus, excuse me, lost its damage. This was to prevent the insta kill frenzy target interaction. If you don't know, if you basically hex charged, say, Sabretooth or a frenzied unit, once that frenzy activated and procced the hex charge, it would just immediately kill them. And the interesting thing about Sabretooth is it would actually take his second life as well. So if you were actually fighting him and, you know, on say, well, no, I guess that situation never comes up. But yeah, it would instantly kill Sabretooth. So yeah, that was fun. Those are the only balance changes we've had. So final vanilla tier list. The last one I did was after Deadpool's release. Now, if you don't know or you're new, I do have a balance mod if you're on PC that sort of overhauls every character in the game in ways that make this tier list a lot less. There's only like 2 tiers on the balance mod versus 4. And so while I have been playing on the balance mod for quite some time, I still talk to people who play on vanilla all the time. I do still test some things on vanilla, so I'm still very in tune with the vanilla game. And then I didn't do a tier list for Venom or Morbius and obviously Storm, because I didn't feel it necessary to do a whole nother video just for the one character. But now I have a better sense of them and the whole game as a whole, obviously. And so this will be the final one. Now, a few things. I do have Hunter separated on screen, as you can see, but that doesn't necessarily mean Hunter is better than everybody else, though that is typically true. I just want to separate her because she's just built differently, she's balanced differently, right? 30 cards versus 10, etc. So don't look at it and assume that, you know, Light Hunter is better than, I don't know, Iron Man, for example, right? Just look at it for that Hunter. I'm talking about her in her own way, and then everybody else, yes, this tier list is ordered, it is segmented as such. I'm gonna try to be very detailed on this one, as like I said, it's gonna be final unless they do some big balance pass or content release. So I'll try not to skip things, but there is a lot to talk about with each character. So if I gloss over, say, a passive or a certain card, forgive me. This is one, you know, I do it in one go. There's no script. It is what it is. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm just going to start with the 3 versions of Hunter and talk about them together. So this being Mixed Hunter, then Dark, then Light. So Mixed Hunter is really, really powerful. It's the best way to play her, in my opinion. You pretty much would run her with, in terms of passives, you would just use either Fully Charged or Master of the Hunt. Fully Charged is arguably the best passive in the game, if not second best, only behind Doctor Strange. And then Master of the Hunt is just ridiculous. Yeah, you only get it at the end of the game, but, you know, for endgame, it's just ridiculous. Not only are your collar thresholds reduced by 1, so you can like still cause infinite looping, but you're just immune to all status effects. I'm pretty sure, I don't remember, but there was one that kind of went through. I think it was Wounded. I don't know. But the point is, Hunter is just insane. It's like having resilience, but better. And yeah, so Mixed Hunter is insane. You can use, yeah, Obsidian Collar, Balance Collar, and then Fully Charged or Master of the Hunt, and you'll have just an insane character. You pretty much would use something like Last Sight with Wild Strike for your dark cards, Heal and Call to Arms if you wanted it for your light, and then whatever power cards, right? Quick Slash is great, Wrath, Slash, you know, Blade Storm for your legendary or Annihilation. Like, she just has so many cards that are great, but then Hunter also has so many cards that are awful. The thing is, though, having 30 cards, you can make one or two Hunter decks on vanilla that are insanely good, where all 8 cards are better than like 10 of some of the characters' cards put together, right? So honestly, that's what makes Hunter so strong is her like the worst card in your Hunter deck is better than other characters' best card in their deck. So yeah, Hunter's just really strong. If you're not going to play mixed Hunter, I'd recommend a more dark focused Hunter using Obsidian Color or Renegade Color. Same thing, just fully charged or Master of the Hunt. And then Light Hunter is the weakest of the bunch for sure, like for sure. And that's because light cards have this problem where they're good early on for sure, but they fall off really hard because either you don't need as much healing or they don't do enough damage. That's usually the problem. And honestly, Paragon Color and Ivory Color are just not strong colors compared to Balanced or Obsidian. So that hurts the playstyle as well. Some people still run it though. It can still work again, especially with the likes of Heal and Call to Arms. Those cards are really strong. And then you could sprinkle in things like Holy Spark, Bands of Fire, Morning Star if you roll quick, etc. But I try not to discuss mods too much in these because I'm just talking about the characters, right? So yeah, I'd say Mixed Hunter is top, and then Dark Hunter would be second, and then Light Hunter would be third. If we're just strictly discussing Hunter, she has so many cards, it's not really worth going through, but yeah, like pretty much something in the way of Quick Strike, Wild Strike, Last Sight, heal, fortify, whip, annihilation, or something, right? Whip, blade storm. A deck like that, you can tweak all of it, but a deck like that's just going to go so far. It's so good. So Hunter is insanely strong. Now, let's get into the rest of the roster. So first up, we're going to have Doctor Strange. So Doctor Strange is an insane character. His passive is the best in the game in terms of the characters that are non-hunter. Again, you can argue that fully charged is maybe better. Having that random +2 heroism at the beginning of a mission and then every subsequent turn, it's really, really strong. But what really pushes him over the edge is having Vapors of Veltor as a card. Now, does having one really broken card break the character? Yes, it does in this case. Why? Because it's really the only point and click, easy to use conceal in the game. Yes, Magik does have Banish, which works in very similar ways, but it's a heroic card that costs 3. There's a bit more of an investment there. Whereas Vapors of Veltor is a skill card, it generates 2 heroism, and it heals upon upgrade. It's so ridiculous. You synergize that with Wolverine or Captain America's taunts, right? Taunt the whole board and then conceal them. The enemies don't get to take a turn, right? And so that interaction alone puts him in top 5. But what pushes him to top 2, top 1 category is the fact that he basically has no bad cards other than Shield of the Seraphim. And even then, it's not a bad card, it's just a bit expensive, right? You could go through the list, right? Winds of Watum, one of the best quicks in the game, being a knockback. Bolt of Belthok, while not used often in strange decks, it's because there's no room in the decks for it. It's not that it's a bad card, but it does do chunky damage. Um, Blessing of the Vishanti, niche to use, but when it works, it's really good. Agamotto's Gaze uniquely gives you 4 card plays the following turn, and it's got draw power that also buffs them. So say if you used a quick, like say Quick Kick on Spider-Man, and you used Agamotto's Gaze, all of a sudden that card now has a base damage coefficient on top of its insane effect coefficient, which is 100% offense. Like Agamotto's Gaze, Vapors of Veltor, and Winds of Watum alone, you can make a deck right there that's 6 cards, right? And you just sprinkle in a heroic or 2, right? Crimson Bands and maybe an Axe of Angarumus for some utility, and you have yourself an amazing character. But even so, if you're a big item user, you have Astral Meditation on this character, so you probably learn to love him. And even if you don't use items, he's really, really insane. And yeah, he does everything. His common deck is really good. Again, save for Blessing of the Vishanti unupgraded. That card's a little underwhelming, but you just replace that, and you can run his deck with 6, 7 common cards, and it's almost the best version of his deck, which is insane. And when that's just the common cards, and you're not even getting into the other ones, it says a lot about the character. Again, on top of having an insane passive, he does really good damage. He's the best support in the game, bar none. And yeah, the point and click conceal just breaks the game entirely, and that cannot be overstated. Like I cannot stress that enough. That Vapors of Valtor breaks the game at all skill levels, at all difficulties, whether you use items or not. It does not matter. In no realm of existence is Vapors of Valtor a well-designed and fair card in Marvel Midnight Suns. Okay, I could continue going on about Strange, but I'm just gonna end up talking in circles. He's so good. If you haven't really played him before, and or you don't think he's very good, I highly encourage you to try again. That is my thoughts on Strange. Next up is Storm. So Storm, I'll spend a bit more time talking about Storm as she is the newcomer. I have made a video on this to some degree, though my thoughts have since changed a little bit because I've discovered some new interactions. Storm is broken, and I don't mean broken. Well, she is really strong, but she's actually broken in that her cards are not working as intended. So I'm just going to reference the wiki here for a moment so that you can not just take my word for it, but have it as a visual reference. So Storm's Hellstorm card, right? It reads, you know, deal more per storm card in hand. Next turn, draw 3 or 2 or 3, doesn't matter, and then exhaust. But if you haven't noticed by now, and you've been playing Storm, her Hellstorm card does not actually exhaust. This patch is littered with bugs, and this one is one of the most egregious ones. There are 2 others that are massive. Just to mention those, you can't knock back a marked enemy into an ally and get them marked. It's not working. And then you also, in terms of villain encounters, you typically on a mission will not, well, no, you will not get a villain if you get 3 elite enemies, but that check is now being bypassed, so you're getting missions that are exponentially harder than they were prior to Storm's release. These are all bugs. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but because of that Hellstorm interaction, it really breaks Storm. It like, in terms of broken. But even if it was working as intended, she still is a top 3 character. And there are a few reasons for this. I guess it's best to maybe just use the wiki because people may not know her card names quite yet as she is new, so we'll just have this as a visual reference. So let's talk about it. So Arc is a okay card. It is what it is. It's a chain. Not much to say there. Gale Force is pretty solid when upgraded. It gives forceful knockback quick just innately. You can skip the next turn. Vortex, I'm a big fan. I know a lot of people aren't, but it also is solid. Call the Lightning is okay. It just doesn't really fit in the deck. Rushing Blow is solid, just doesn't fit in the deck. Hellstorm I just touched on. I'll come back to this. Livewire, I'll come back to this. And then her skill cards are all interesting in that they're all strong. Overload being the weakest of the bunch, but having Strengthen on redraw is definitely a unique effect that's really powerful. Storm Shield is insanely good, borderline broken. I say borderline because resist doesn't work against supervillains, and it doesn't work on Storm herself, so it's slightly balanced in that way, but it is still really strong. And Goddess's Blessing is insane. It honestly brings the character together. I think a Storm deck without Goddess's Blessing is actually fair, almost, but I'm going to talk about that. So these are her cards. Again, just as a visual reference, I want you guys to just have these 10 cards in mind so we can discuss. Okay, so Storm's passive is pretty bad, honestly. It's bad not that it stuns, it's bad because you can never rely on it. It kind of has the Captain Marvel passive problem where counter is good and stun is good, but you know, if counter happens and you're not being attacked, it's useless. Or if the stun happens and you don't need to stun that character and instead you're going to kill them, you effectively didn't have a passive, right? So it's nice to have, but it's not great. Yeah, so Storm is cool in that you can kind of build her 2 different ways. You can edge her more towards damage, you can edge her more towards support. This is what I touched on briefly in my Storm build video. But the thing is, nothing else really matters other than the interaction between Goddess's Blessing and Hellstorm and Livewire. Livewire specifically is the most egregious part of the character's kit. Now, I will say, and I will die on this hill, that if you're not running Storm with two copies of upgraded Livewire, you need to be running Storm with two copies of Livewire. Now, you don't even need to. Honestly, you could just run one, and it's insane. But it's so ridiculous how the math works, specifically on Hellstorm, that it's insane. So just to explain it, Livewire gives Storm, okay, Storm, an additional 50% offense. Not her cards, but Storm. What this means is Arc, which typically does 50% offense coefficient on each chain hit, is now with one Livewire card doing 75% offense, not 50% offense. And then with two Livewire cards, it's doing 100% offense, not 50% offense. So Arc is now slapping for 400% offense, and then you have your Vortex and your Gale Force just get buffed because knockbacks are based off your base offense. But then the biggest problem is Hellstorm, because your Hellstorm card, the passive, again, I'll pull this up so we're on the same page. The passive is deal 150% offense for each Storm card in your hand. Here's the thing. That's 150% of Storm's offensive coefficient. Livewire buffs Storm's offensive damage coefficient, or offensive coefficient. So yeah, this card is still 150%, but it's like exponential. And when you get two Livewires in your hand, it over doubles the power of Hellstorm. It's closer to 4 times the strength, depending on how many Storm cards are in your hand. So it's just so ridiculous. And the fact it doesn't exhaust, it's only 3 heroism. If you compare other cards that are 3 heroism or exhaust and nukes, for example, Penance Stare. Penance Stare is a 4 heroism cost card with exhaust. It nukes half of Ghost Rider's health, and it still does less damage than Hellstorm. Hellstorm is not even difficult to use either. And the other thing that makes Hellstorm strong that I just want to mention now before I forget is that you can proc the next turn constantly. So next turn, draw 3, redraw Hellstorm. Next turn, draw 3, redraw Hellstorm. And you can do this if you're playing Storm in more of a supporty way rather than a DPS way. And it's just free card draw. It's just literally free card cycling. It's a net +3 if you redraw it. So it's just, it's so strong. But then it's even worse because you have Goddess's Blessing, which draw 2 Storm cards and activate next turn. If you play Hellstorm or Goddess's Blessing and you draw into Hellstorm, you are drawing a net positive 4 cards, which then obviously buffs Hellstorm's effect because now you've used next turn, the exhaust doesn't even work, and then you now have, I would say on average, 5 to 6 Storm cards in hand. And if any of those is Livewire, I can guarantee you that with 6 Storm cards in hand, one of which being Livewire and the other one being Hellstorm, with no items, no buffs, like no champion levels, Ultimate 3, by the way, you are one-shotting bosses. And this is not, this isn't hyperbole either. I have clips of this. It's ridiculous. This character is so brain dead because she doesn't work as intended. And even if Hellstorm worked as intended, she would still be top 3 at least. It's so dumb. You run 2 copies of Livewire, 1 copy of Hellstorm, 1 copy of Storm Shield, and then 1 copy of Goddess's Blessing. That's 5 cards. And then do whatever you want with the other 3 slots. And it's so brain dead. It's so brain dead because of how the math works. Like, even with 1 Livewire, I was able to one-shot, for example, Dracula. My Storm was level 23, and I had no strength in. He didn't have vulnerability or anything like that. 1 Livewire, 6 Storm cards with Hellstorm, one-shot. Like, what? It's so brain dead, and it's not even working as intended. I hate it so much. that they release this and they make it even better just because of bugs and false interactions. So yeah, she's dumb. If you're popping off with Storm and you think you're hot shit, I'm sorry, you're not. She's there's no skill at all in this character. It's not even hard. And her whole concept of like holding cards in hand for next turn and this is completely deleted by Goddess's Blessing because Goddess's Blessing goes around that issue. It's a net draw too, and so it's just really strong in general. So yeah, it's yeah, yeah. I don't know. Livewire is fucking broken, and it, it it's Livewire that ruins the character. Livewire and Hellstorm's non-exhaust. If those two things weren't what they were, she'd be solid, but not broken. So yeah, I could rant about Storm for a while, but she's brain dead, and I hate it so much. Yeah, that's Storm. Next up, Magik. So Magik, she's been up here since literally pre-release. I went and checked my pre-release tier list just for fun, and a lot of it still holds up to today, but Magik has not changed. She's really, really strong. Um, she has a nice gradual curve in that her deck starts out playable but not broken, and then when you get some rares, she feels nice, but then the moment you get Limbo's Grasp, she's broken. And it's not even close. Like behind Storm, she's top one in terms of DPS because if you roll Limbo's Grasp normally, it's really strong. If you roll it free, it's insane. It's cheating basically. And the reason why is cards like Kick, which have a high coefficient of 150 and a knockback, get massively increased by Limbo's Grasp. Limbo's Grasp stacks, which is broken. Her Quick becomes insanely broken. And then, yeah, Darkchild is an insanely good support card when you use it, and it has exhaust, so you're thinning the deck, which means you're cycling through Magic cards more often. Her passive just completely works in unison with Limbo's Grasp as well. And she does have a problem on vanilla where half her cards are useless in that they don't interact with her passive or Limbo's Grasp. And then the other half are insanely strong. She is one of these characters where you pretty much build her one way. Pardon me. That being two quick Soul Slash and one or two kicks. You bring two Limbo's Grasp, then you bring like just one heroic, whether it's Banish or Darkchild, just pick one. And then take one heroic and then four attacks, three skills, and you have an insanely broken Magic character. And what makes her even worse is she was already doing everything I just talked about on release, right? But what makes Magik even more insane is the fact that Deadpool DLC, as useless as the character is, we'll get there, and as bad as his missions kind of were, in my opinion, the food truck, is broken. It's one of the best researches in the game, and it came with the worst of the four DLCs, and it completely buffs Magik in all regards. Because giving Magik a second shove, access to one, even once a mission, means that she gets yet another Limbo's Grasp proc, yet another roll on her passive. So one play of Limbo's Grasp makes her one of the best DPS in the game. Two plays of Limbo's Grasp makes her the best DPS in the game consistently. Like, yeah, Storm is a bit higher than Magik, and it is an ordered tier list. The difference is that Storm doesn't take any effort to just one-shot a boss. Magik isn't exactly one-shotting a boss with even one or two Limbo's Grasp plays. However, she is able to basically one-shot most units in the game that aren't bosses, and that I feel like is, well, not as egregious, it is more useful in more situations because if a shove is killing a medium tier unit, that's really ridiculous. Or when you're able to just use your quicks on non-enemy or non-minion enemies, that's really strong, right? So yeah, Magik is just insane. And if you're not going to use Darkchild for your one heroic, you have Banish, which is a point and click conceal. Or if you use it on supervillains, it actually eats both their actions. I think it's the only CC in the game where that is the case. So that's insanely unique as well. And she just does everything that you need. She's so easy to build, and you can kind of figure out what cards to avoid when you realize that things like Trapdoor, Gather don't interact with her passive. Reinforcement is completely useless in every way, and Soul Blast is just outshined by Kick and QSS. So there you go. That's all the cards. Really not much more to say on Magik. She's very straightforward. Um, really insanely strong. That's Magik. Next up is Cap. Cap is not as powerful as Storm and Magik, but he is arguably the most consistent character in the game and the most useful character with regards to beginning to end. I would say that if you're struggling on say higher difficulties, or you're trying to up your difficulty to maybe Ultimate 1 or Ultimate 2, Cap might be what you're missing if you're playing on vanilla. He trivializes the game early, mid game rather, with his sustain. Dig in is ridiculously overtuned for block generation. You have shield bounce, which is insane as a debuff. You have his quick punch is one of the better quicks in the game, having a draw on kill. And then once you do, so his common deck is really good. It's really good. The worst card of the four being punch, and it's not even that horrible. His rares, you have Spang, Shield Bash, and Dig In. Shield Bash and Spang are debatably okay, but Dig In is egregious. It's so broken. You upgrade it, all of a sudden you have counter now. Like, it's insane. But then you get to his epics, which are both insanely strong. And the moment you unlock the best defense, it's kind of like Limbo's Grasp, in that it just completely turns the character up to 11. So he goes from being this like beefy tank bot that can't die to being a beefy tank bot that can't die, but with less card plays and less effort to do so, because of how the best defense works. So he's just so consistent. And while obviously he doesn't bring the same damage as a DPS, as a tank slash support character, he has so much heroism generation, draw power, block generation, taunting capabilities, debuffs, a great quick, knockback if you want it via Brooklyn Handshake. And yeah, he's just so solid. You cannot, like, you yeah, you cannot ever go wrong bringing him on a comp ever. His passive is okay. It's not great. The numbers are a bit low for my taste, but it is what it is. His legendary card Shield Charge is awful until you get the best defense, and then it's actually pretty nice. And you can run it if you want. I don't really use it, but it's good. You can use it. He works really well with everybody. He works well with a ton of items in the game as well. And yeah, he's just so solid. I don't really know like what else I would say about him. Very straightforward. Like 8 of his cards are really good, and you can never go wrong. He's just the best tank in the game, honestly. I know there's only like 2, 3 arguably, but he's the best tank on vanilla. It's not even close, and that's what puts him in S tier for me. And last up to round out our S tier is going to be Morbius. So Morbius, I haven't talked about him yet, much like Storm. So Morbius is a character who is honestly a complete package right out of the box, and he's not even broken. He is self-sufficient. He has a coherent uh, game plan and kit design. He has like one bad card, and then his common deck has unupgraded charm, which is completely useless. But other than that, it's good. He interacts with the vampires on the DLC better than, well, better than Blade, but better than anybody, right? Just with how his passive works, it really just unlocks his game plan. He's kind of his passive Bloodlust is pretty much what Binary wants to be, and they did a really good job with Morbius. He has some utility. He's a great DPS. He can tank with the likes of Cornered and Mistform, and yeah, he's just so solid. The only bad cards he has, again, unupgraded charm is one of the worst cards in the game, but his legendary card isn't very good, and neither is Echolocate. But even then, those aren't bad cards. They're just a bit outclassed within the character's own design. He's fantastic. I love playing the character. I think he's super well designed. He takes a bit of effort to get going, and then once you're going, you're off. And he works well with most characters in the game. Just really solid. I honestly have no complaints. I think of the 4 DLCs, they did the best job with Morbius in terms of balance and design. He has some unique mechanics and just overall unique designs that bring a lot to the game. That being, like, yeah, Feeding Frenzy is just Reaper 2.0, but like Charm is really strong. That, you know, it's on a non-hunter character. And then you have, what is it? Oh my gosh, sorry, it's oh yeah, Shadow Strike. The name was escaping me. Shadow Strike is really cool in that it's a one heroism chain that's doesn't do much damage, but the fact that you can use it as draw power and bleed application, I find that to be pretty unique. You don't often see draw power on attacks and heroics to the same degree as skill cards, and so Morbius has that. So honestly, really fantastic character. His missions are great too. Um, overall, one of the best DLCs, like top two. His research is kind of shit, but it is what it is. Yeah, really, really great character, really great passive. You can't go wrong. I know some people, I've talked to some people, and they struggle with, they couldn't really get Morbius going. Some people have even stated that they think Blade is better than Morbius, which is actually the opposite. And we'll talk about this a bit more when we get to Blade, but Morbius is the better Blade. That I can assure you. And I think where people maybe go wrong is I think people are maybe building him a bit off. I see some people running like 2 Shadow Strikes, it's very clunky, or they're running 2 copies of either Mist or Cornered, it's pretty clunky. I think just anecdotally, what people have been missing in my conversations with them is Claw. Claw, it really brings the character together. I know that sounds a bit weird, but truly, Claw changes the dynamic of Morbius entirely to where that's your main point of damage, that's your main source of damage, and then it is also your post bleed application, meaning you would apply bleed with, say, Shadow Strike, and then you would Claw, which would then give them a net 4 bleed stacks. That opens up now Feeding Frenzy for just a one-shot kill, right? And this is the dynamic of the character. He can one-shot things like Storm can. The difference between the two is that Morbius actually takes a bit of work and bleed stacking to do it for reasonable setup and payoff, whereas Storm does not have reasonable setup or payoff. So yeah, great character. If you haven't really played with him, I think you should. If you're struggling with him, maybe consider running 4 attacks and then only 2 skills and 2 heroics. Try that and see how it goes. So that's it for A tier. Like I said, let's transition to, or it's it for S tier. Let's transition to A tier Venom. So Venom, very close to Morbius, like very, very, very close. Really nice character out of the box. His missions were kind of cool. We were introduced to like the first one, right? Blood Venom. Really interesting takes. The first time you see Frenzy on a boss that isn't Sabretooth, so I really liked that. Even though there's some cheese to the mission, but we're not talking about that. Venom is, at first glance, he seems a bit bland, right? You look at him and you're like, okay, so you have 2 chain attacks, you have an AoE that never binds, you have a burst damage, so you have a Tasty Brains, which is like steak but more expensive, and you have quick, or Tendril Strike, which is just a better quick shot. Okay, seems pretty uninspiring, right? But then you look at the character and you're like, okay, even though he's kind of pulling from a lot of different characters, right? Spider-Man, Deadpool, Hulk with his passive, Blade with Stake, and then like, again, general Spider-Man similarities, it really all culminates in a really nice way. Venom can be a pseudo tank. He's quite beefy. You can 1v9 with him. You can like win in 1 turn with his assimilation plays, but you don't have to. This is what I like about him. You don't have to go the assimilation route. Whereas a lot of characters, you know, they would design them and you would almost be forced to go that assimilation, just kill everything direction. But you don't have to do that with Venom. Venom on vanilla out of the box gets two builds, a DPS build or a support build. And this is very rare. This is something that I've had to work into the balance mod for majority of the cast, but not for Venom. He actually comes with two ways to play. That's what I love the most about him. And pretty much to summarize it for you, if you're going the assimilation route, you just run like 0 or 1 symbiote binds, the heroic. And then if you're going the support route, you just run 1 or 2 symbiote binds and you just don't run assimilation. And he feels great. He works great with both. He has massive damage with the likes of Lethal Embrace and then Tasty Brains as well. His quick Tendril Strike is one of the best quicks in the game. And yeah, Ravenous Strike is great. Web Toss is decent if you want to have a knockback on him. Symbiotic Senses I thought was a bit underwhelming, but if you're not running Assimilation, it's a good sort of tech option. And then Insatiable Hunger is an amazing free card that you can always run 2 copies of if you just want a deck cycle. And that totally works well too. So yeah, he's very, very complete. Now, we can start talking about negatives now that we're out of the S tier. What holds Venom back? Well, it's kind of a few things. The first is that he does rely on Ravenous, a lot like how Hulk relies on Rage. The difference between the two characters is Venom starts at full Ravenous and works his way down, and you can kind of play around it. Whereas Hulk has to start at 0 Rage and work his way up to it. The way Venom's designed, it's a lot easier and a lot better to play with than it is Hulk. If Venom started at 0 Ravenous and is designed the way he was, I don't think he'd be very good at all. So yeah, he's very good. I play him as a bit more of a support on vanilla, a bit more of a DPS on balance mod, just for fun. And yeah, Symbiotic Bind of the binds, I would argue is the best one. Those being Crimson Bands of Sidorak, Thwip, Symbiotic Bind, and I'm going to include Livewire, even though it's a stun. The reason why I think Symbiotic is the best is because its passive effect. Here, I'll pull it up for you because it doesn't really read as well as it works. So I kind of want to explain it. Where are we here? Symbiotic Bind. So if you read the upgrade, draw a Venom card for each attack against the target this turn. This carries over into the next turn. Now, I don't know if this is a bug, but meaning you can bind the character, have them be bound to eat their action, and then the following turn, every attack against the target, that includes shoves, heroics, attack cards, everything, will then draw a card, which is so powerful because it's just free draw power on an already really good card. So I really like it. I mean, Crimson Bands would be the second best, applying vulnerability, and then Thwip being the worst of the bunch. But Symbiotic Bind is just so good. Again, it might be a bug. I don't know, but I don't think so. Yeah, so Venom is super good. His missions are good. You can build him 2 different ways, and I don't really have his passive. It works really well with the character, right? We are Venom. You have a 25% chance to retain your Ravenous. It works really well, honestly. He's great. He doesn't have any bad cards, and that is a blessing. It's rare to not have any bad cards. He does not. Okie dokie. Next up will be Iron Man, and I already know that people are going to start yelling at me about this one, but let me explain. Iron Man is not a top 5 character, contrary to what Reddit will tell you or Discord will tell me. And the reason I believe this is very simple. He simply does not have the consistency of the 6 characters above him, that being like Venom and then the 5 in S tier. And what I mean by that is if you look at Venom from a damage perspective, Morbius from a damage perspective, Magik, and Storm, all 4 of those characters require varying amounts of work to get their reward, but it makes sense, it's coherent, it works. It doesn't require like building your team a certain way. It doesn't require certain missions. It doesn't require items. It doesn't require mods. It doesn't require any of that. But Iron Man requires a lot of those things to really pop off. And like he's a good character, hence why he's an A tier. If you just play him normally, like I don't even really play him as a carry character. I just kind of use him for like his quick is one of the better quicks in the game. Heads up is actually a super underrated card. Mark target is very good, and then air superiority or surgical strike. I like to roll a debuff on either of those, and then run one or the other or both if they both get a debuff. But a lot of people play Iron Man as a carry with the likes of surgical strike, precision, hellfire beam, right? Those kinds of cards. Leave it to me, etc. And if you play him as carry, there's a few issues. Okay, so number one, you have to have a ton of access to redraws, be it items or characters or his passive, which definitely not impossible. It's a lot of work, right? Number two, you don't really get to redraw non-Iron Man cards when you run him in the deck, period. Or, sorry, on the team, period. That's a limiting factor. If Iron Man, for whatever reason, gets CC'd or goes down, right? So he gets bounced, stunned, dazed, dies, confused if you're fighting Wanda, right? You're just stuck with his cards. Like the Deadpool DLC food truck does help this slightly by giving you a discard, but that's one submission. So you can definitely get bricky hands with Iron Man 2. Like you can open turn 1 with a near unplayable hand depending on what you get as Iron Man, and that feels really, really bad. Another thing that I haven't talked about with the characters prior is hero combos. Most of the characters prior to Iron Man actually have pretty good hero combos, but I'm not really talking about them unless it's really broken or bad. Iron Man has arguably, it's either the worst or the second worst hero combo in the game, and it's not even close. Because, as in, the other ones don't even come close to the bottom two, the other one being Ghost Rider. Iron Man's, just as a refresher, it costs one less heroism per redraw, starting at 4 heroism. So, like, you really think as an Iron Man player, I'm going to invest my redraws into hero combo? Hell no. But then you can't get rid of the hero combo because you can't redraw it until you redraw it for the 5th time. See the problem? Hellfire Beam, same problem. You can never redraw it. Precision, incredibly hard to redraw. Air Superiority, incredibly hard to redraw, right? Like, so you can kind of just get stuck with Iron Man cards, and that feels really, really bad. Now, if you do play him with like every item and you completely build your team around him and you like build your roster around him, as in like a lot of draw power characters, a lot of gain redraws, right? +1 redraws and stuff like that. Yeah, he feels amazing. But to get him to that point takes a lot of work if you want to build him as a DPS. Now, if you want to build him as a support, like I do, or sort of like a flex damage character, where you're not really using redraws that much, which is why I use, again, the quick. You don't really have to redraw it for it to be good. I don't really use blast because I don't want to use the redraw. I use mark target, which is good without redraw. Surgical strike has no redraw. Air superiority, you don't really need the redraw if you're using it for a debuff. You see the trend here? I tend to just avoid the redraw mechanic with Iron Man, but that's just a personal choice. So for those reasons, in an optimized scenario, yes, Iron Man's like top 3, right? Better than Magik. I don't think he's better than Storm, but top 3 in perfect scenario, fully modded deck, item included, he's top 3. But the amount of work it takes to get him to that level, it just takes too much. And yeah, I'm not saying he's a bad character though. Like, don't misunderstand. A tier, like we're still in the top 7. Like, it's really good. So he's good. I'm just not really a fan of his gameplay, which is sad because he's one of my favorite characters. But I think you can build him sort of 1.5 ways, which is nice. Kind of like Venom in that sense. I just think carry Iron Man is not as good as some of the other carries unless everything goes right and perfect for you. Whereas more of a supporty pseudo DPS, Iron Man is a lot more consistent if you want to play him that way. So. And again, the worst hero combo in the game, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like that is just a byproduct of running Iron Man, and that is the reality that we live in. And for that reason, honestly, that hurts him a lot because these 6, just as reference, are really strong. Okay, Storms isn't that great, but these 5, really, really good. Strange buffs your hand. Magik gives you a move. Cap gives you block. Morbius works with Morbius. Venom draws 2 cards. Like, these are all really strong effects. Okay, so that's Iron Man. Next up, Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider, honestly, I thought about putting him above Iron Man, and I think you can interchange these 2 characters. I'm just going to leave it this way. And that's because Ghost Rider pretty much has one build and one way to play him, and that's it. Whereas Iron Man at least has some flexibility there. Ghost Rider is a great character. This is another one of those, kind of like Morbius, where people have expressed some issues with the character to me before, and I did too, honestly. When the game came out in my first run, I was like, this character, I don't get it. This character is not very good. But what I quickly learned was that the self-harm doesn't matter, and I was building his deck wrong the entire time. So again, I am a believer that he has little to no variation in his builds, that being 2 copies of Lash, 2 copies of Straight to Hell, 1 copy of Hellmouth, 2 copies of Hellride, and 1 copy of Penance Stare. The only flexibility really in there is you could cut Hellride to run 1 and run, say, maybe like a Retribution. But I don't really think there's any other way to play the character. He's just Lash into Hellride bot, you use Hellmouth for the strengthened and the free repositioning tool, so you don't have to use your move. And then Straight to Hell to refill your health. It's a self-conceal, which is broken. We've talked about that a bunch. I didn't even touch on that with Morbius, but yeah, Morbius has Mist Form, and it's very similar to Ghost Rider's Straight to Hell in that these 2 cards complement the character's kits in ways that are borderline broken, but not quite. Again, because it's a self-conceal, it's not quite as egregious as Vapors of Valtor. Ghost Rider 2, you use him a fair bit in the story, starting in Act 2, and you continue to throughout, so it's nice that he's good for that reason. Penance Stare is a great nuke card, and then Hellride, same thing. Ghost Rider works with a lot of mods in the game too, which can't be said about every character, so that's nice in general. His passive, though, and his hero combo really do hold him back, and I mean really, because his hero combo, at least you can redraw it like Iron Man, or unlike Iron Man's, so you can roll into your other characters in your party, but his hero combo is not good. It inflicts damage to allies and himself. It's just not great. But his passive is where it gets really bad, because his filling the souls bar increases your max health by 15%, okay? For a limit of 2 times in the mission. That's not the bad part. The bad part is the free Drain Souls, not free, but the copy of Drain Souls that it throws in your deck. Drain Souls is a terrible card on vanilla in that it starts at 1 heroism for pitiful damage. It's only 50% offense per chain. So the fact that the chain number goes up and the heroism goes up, I think is ridiculous. It's so bad. It's so pitiful damage. It's not even a good healing skill. You might as well just use Straight to Hell. So the fact that it's like killing things with Ghost Rider puts that card in rotation is so bad. It's so bad. But even with that, that just sort of speaks to the power of the cards that he has that are good. Again, half of his cards are dog water, like Hell Fury, Immolate, Judgment is okay, I guess. Retribution's okay. What's the other one? Well, anyway, half his cards are really bad, but you just run a couple copies of Lash, Straight to Hell, Hellmouth, Hellride, and Penance Stare, and you just run those cards in any quantity that you're happy with. He's incredible. He does so much damage. He's great against bosses. He kind of does it all. He's a great tank. He having that self-conceal, he 1v9s missions. He's pretty solid. He's just a bit tricky to play. Bit of a dynamic there with the Hellmouth if you don't want to be using your move to set up Hell Rides. And you have to manage your health a little bit. So I quite like the nuance of the character, but I can see how he's not for everybody, and he does have those downsides. So solid A tier for me. And last up in A tier is Hulk. Hulk shares a lot of similarities with the likes of Venom, but the thing is, how do I think about this for a second? Hulk is, well, okay, he is a World Breaker bot. Let's just get that out of the gate. You save up enough heroism and you attempt to generate enough rage, and then by the time you have Worldbreaker in hand and the heroism to play it, regardless of your rage, you're typically just playing the card. Like, yeah, boom, destroy your environmentals if you don't need to use them, and do a bunch of damage, right? Problem is that playstyle of Hulk is not very good. His cards outside of Smash and Worldbreaker are not very good either. He is very heroism expensive, and I mean like the most heroism expensive character in the game. His common deck is borderline unplayable for this reason, with 2 copies of Rampage, 2 copies of Thunderclap. He does have some stun nuance, which is nice ever since Storm's release, so that does make Hulk a little bit better, though it doesn't put him up on my list any higher than he would be if Storm was not released. So there's some synergy there with the new character, which I do appreciate. But honestly, running the if target is stunned mods on cards or cards for Hulk, it's a gimmick. It's not very good. It's very unreliable as well. So Smash is solid, and then what is it called? Seismic Slam is okay. World Breaker is solid, and then Challenging Roar, once upgraded, is good as a tool to generate heroism and rage. But other than that, he's okay. You can run him. He's not a very good tank. He's not a great damage dealer until he's at 3 rage or more. That's just statistically evident with his cards. And yeah, so he does take some work, but once he gets going, he can snowball pretty hard, I'll admit, and if he's protected. But that's the thing, is he doesn't quite have enough damage to be the damage carry, but then he's not even remotely tanky enough to ever be a bruiser or a tank, as his always angry sustain is not great. So yeah, he's okay. He's okay. It's really not much to say on Hulk. He's just expensive. Worldbreaker bot, just get in there, get 6 heroism, slam, move on with your life. That's really all he does, but it is effective enough to justify the bottom of A tier, in my opinion. Alright, so starting off on B tier, this tier, honestly, I was kind of really fiddling with the order. So I'm gonna say before I place any character, the B tier I think can be rearranged in any way you see fit, save for the last one. So first up, I have Wolverine. Wolverine is a character who, on the higher difficulties, is pretty pitiful as a tank. On the lower difficulties, he's actually really solid. One thing is nice though, in that you can use him as sort of a sacrificial lamb play, as I call it, where you purposely just taunt everything and you just let him die, and then you sort of get a free turn because he of course generates rapid regeneration as a free card, and so you can just res him. And that's the only res, non-combat item res on Ultimate 3 that you get access to. So that's nice. Excuse me. However, I don't really recommend building him as a tank on vanilla. He is much, much better as just a bruiser slash DPS. So, and this comes in the form of Lethal Pounce and Midnight Special. So Lethal Pounce giving full combo strengthened, and the card itself does pretty reasonable damage as well. Into Midnight Special, that setup with, I would say, 7 or more heroism will just wipe boards. Like, you'll just delete them off the face of the earth. Wolverine is also incredibly good on Nest Mother missions, one of the best characters in the game, honestly, at them. If you don't have the damage to break the protection and then one-shot the Nest Mother, Wolverine is sort of your next best choice because he has all the chains. You can just go totem, 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 taunt the Guardian or whatever, and then again, totem, 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 boom, win the mission, right? So I would suggest playing him as DPS first and then Bruiser second. I wouldn't really taunt for the sake of taunting, but I would bring him as an off tank with a DPS who's a bit more self-sufficient. For example, you can run Wolverine with, say, Ghost Rider, Morbius, Storm, right? Because she has Storm Shield. Storm Shield works great with Wolverine, I'll admit. So her introduction into the game makes Wolverine a lot more playable than he was, or as a tank, than he is without Storm. So that's nice. Yeah, overall though, outside of Lethal Pounce Midnight Special, his damage is not there. and his tanking capabilities are not that good either. His passive doesn't really heal enough. Berserk is clunky. Rapid healing is useless. Not savage. Piercing slash is awful. And yeah, yeah, I would say that's about it. He's okay. He's okay. But if we're talking tanking, I would never take Wolverine over Captain America ever if we're discussing tank. And if we're discussing DPS carry, I would never take Wolverine over any of the characters above him as a damage dealer. So he rides this weird fine line, but again, I will preface that he is very good on Nest Mother missions. So, not much else to say there. Next up, Spider-Man. Like Wolverine, I'll just start with this. He's very, very good on Nest Mother missions because of Chain Strike and Quick Kick. I'll end up here as well, I guess. So, Spider-Man is weird in that he's supposed to be environmental, right? But environmental attacks do hit a limit pretty quickly, right? By the time the yard is level 25, they're done. They don't go any higher, and then enemies do continue to scale up to level 40 in endgame. So there is that, I guess. And then Opportunist is good though, in that if it's upgraded, it's good because it gives you moves to position 4 environmentals and then it buffs the damage of them. So in that sense, he's a great turn 1 character, right? If you're running Infernal Spider, which I don't really, if you're running it, you can, Infernal Spider, Opportunist, Spider Sense, you can really pop off with Spider-Man on turn 1. The problem is after turn 1, or after a few environmentals have been used up, right? He doesn't really stand the test of time in prolonged missions. He just wants to get in and get out, right? That's his whole thing. Now, I will say, Spider Sense is a great card. Quick Kick is one of the best quicks in the game, arguably the best quick in the game, actually, top 3 if not best, and that's because it does so much damage with the effect active. Now, he also has Up Here, which is a great budget Axe of Angarumus. You have Thwip, which is nice just to have as a bind. You have, like I said, already Opportunist. Webslinger, though, here's the thing with Webslinger. Webslinger is, a gain strengthened free. You might think like, oh, this is broken. I'm always going to run this. But here's the thing. If you actually look at how much damage Webslinger adds to Spider-Man's kit, it's very low. Because Quick Kick not having a base coefficient, Special Delivery not having a base coefficient, Web Throw doesn't have it, and Chain Strike is just clunky and hard to use. It's Up Here, really. So Up Here and arguably Quick Kick are the only cards that benefit from Webslinger, so it's not as good as it may seem on the surface, having that gain strength and free. So I don't run that card personally. It's a bait. For me, I play him as more of an environmental / utility character with, and I don't run Infernal Spider. It's like double Thwip, Up Here. Those are my 3 heroics, and then Opportunist, Spider Sense, Quick Kicks, and Special Delivery. It's something like that. So he just does really bad damage. It doesn't scale well into the late game. He has very low survivability outside of Spider Sense giving 1 resist. It's nice to have. And if you don't get Opportunist on turn 1, Opportunist is never, like, it's just not really worth it at that point. His passive, really difficult to proc. I believe 15% is what it is. He's just so underwhelming, and honestly, like, prior to Venom's release, I would argue that you could bring him as again, that CC utility, but now with Venom existing and you have Doctor Strange as well, I don't really see a world where you would ever willingly want to use Spider-Man. He's just outclassed, but the reason why he's not in C tier is because he does still have Opportunist, he does still have that environmental interaction, on top of having Quick Kick, which again is an insanely good quick card. So there is still some to love about him. He just doesn't stand the test of time into the end game, other than Thwip and environmental damage. So yeah, he's kind of fun though. But Web Slinger definitely a bait. Chain Strike, one of the worst cards in the game. He is also good against Nest Mothers as well, as I started with, so there is that as well. Okay, and that's pretty well it for Spider-Man. Scarlet Witch. So Scarlet Witch, hmm, I kind of went from like bottom three, top five, not top five, bottom three, bottom five, etc. So I've kind of landed on this position for her as she does work really, really well with, say, Morbius, as well as Storm, and then Magik as well. Getting a buff with the Deadpool DLC, it inevitably buffs Scarlet Witch as well, having access to another move, because it's easier to use her passive that way, right? And so the Deadpool truck makes Scarlet at least a playable character, or more playable character. So she, though, I will say, has the worst common deck in the game. And I do think it's even worse than Deadpool's. And it's so bad. Like, the only good card in her common deck, the only playable card in her common deck is Hex Charge, which is terrible. So she starts off so badly. Like, so bad. She is the worst early game character in the game, and it's not even close. And that actually holds her back a lot. Like, because once you get her blues and purples going, she's actually pretty competent, right? Quick Toss at 2, and then Hex Mark at 2, Chaos Reigns, Chaos Field, that's already 6 cards. Rounded out with, say, a Hex Charge and, you know, something else. You have yourself a pretty solid character. But the thing is, her damage is really bad. You don't really want Hex Mark all the time at 2 copies. You don't even want Mark all the time, depending on your build and the characters. Quick Toss, while good, Flash does exist, and Tendril Strike exists. Those are both fantastic quick cards. So Quick Shot post DLC, or Quick Shot, excuse me, Quick Toss, Scarlet Witch's card is what I'm talking about. Doesn't really stand the test of time after all the DLC is out, because pre-DLC, like pre-Deadpool, it was up there with Lash. Like it was Lash and then Quick Toss, or you could interchange the two. But now with, Quick Shot and Tendril Strike coming into the fold, it's okay. It makes Quick Toss a lot less desirable, not desirable, but less powerful than it used to be. Just in relation to all the other quicks in the game, right? I hope that makes sense. So the DLC kind of hurts Scarlet Witch a little bit, even though it brings some things that are good for her. Like I said, the Deadpool truck, but all her commons are dog water, except for Hex Charge upgraded, which even then is arguably not that great. Her legendary is awful. Her blues are all fantastic, except for Detonate, which is just gimmicky, but it does have a use. And her purples are great. So she takes a long time to get going. But once you get it going, she's okay. But she's okay. That's the thing. Because now, again, post DLC, there are better supports in the game. There's more utility in the game. There's, Chaos Field automatically loses value because it's a way more difficult version of Storm Shield, right, to use. Quick Toss isn't unique anymore. Hexmark is semi-unique, so she still retains that. But overall, tricky to use. Not really all that unique anymore like she used to be. So it does keep her low, but honestly, the one thing that keeps her in B tier is the fact that she does have a coherent deck on her own if we're not talking about any other character. Like Quick Toss, Hexmark, Chaos Reigns, Chaos Field, Hex Charge, plus whatever other card you want. Pretty good deck. And then also, I want to reiterate that she works incredibly well with Magik. Like, she's really good with Magik. So that is worth mentioning. Not much else to say on Scarlet Witch. She's ho-hum. I really love the character, though. I like the nuance in her kit, so I'm a fan, but I'd be naive to say that she was anything more than just an average character. And last up, Nico. So Nico, I hate this character. I hate her because she doesn't do anything, okay? Now, the only thing she does do is Curse can sometimes be great, but other times it's useless. Flood Magic is sometimes great, most of the time useless. And then Crack the Sky is her best card, I would say, 1-for-1, in that it does really good damage, it does refund heroism, and the fact that she can give Strengthen means that she can set up herself for a strong Crack the Sky play. However, like Empower and Double Up, you'd think, right? You'd think that Empower and Double Up would be the penultimate Nico cards. They're very unique. There's nothing like them in the game. And yet Double Up is awful. And Empower is so niche, I find myself redrawing it more than playing it. It I run one Empower for what it's worth, but I rarely use it. And it's more like to just get clunky stuff out of your hand. Because think about it this way. If you have any decent heroism economy, you don't need Empower. And Empower typically costing you a card play to then use another card play doesn't really work. When the Empower play could have been a normal skill card that generated 2 heroism, which would probably give you enough heroism to play the heroic card you're trying to play. Obviously, I'm playing out one of many scenarios here, but you kind of get my point, I hope. It's like Empower isn't good when you have heroism, but then it's not really worth the card play when you don't have heroism. So it keeps it in this weird limbo state where it's like, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. Um, she doesn't have a quick. I know I haven't mentioned that about any character like Hulk yet, but I am going to mention it about Nico because I think she would really benefit from a quick. She has one on the balance mod for what it's worth, and she just doesn't do anything. Her best feat is giving strength into people. Yeah, that's the only thing she's good at. And now I will say, if this was a Vapors of Valtor situation where she just had a card that was apply one strengthened, period, like no strings attached, she'd be really good. And she'd be really good because you would have that CC from Curse and then that utility from Empower, Restore, Double Up, whatever you want. But to reliably have 2 copies of Apply One Strengthened would be insanely strong. But that's not the world we live in. So Nico is ho hum at best, but she's not as bad as the C tier. So that rounds out the B tier. And first up, Blade. Blade, I've Blade has always been a mediocre character, but Morbius's release is the literal nail in the coffin. Forgive the pun. For him, Morbius literally is the better Blade in every conceivable way, except for arguably the Hunger, which isn't even that good of a card. But Blade takes 2 card plays to do what Morbius does in 1. He takes 2 card plays to do pitiful damage, and Reaper, while that is his big nuke card, takes a lot of work to make it worth it. Yes, Morbius can enable Blade to feel like a better character. Say if you're running Morbius and Blade on the same team, it makes them both feel better. But that should be a foregone conclusion. Like isn't that obvious? So if you omit that reality, Blade on a team without Morbius is so bad. And what makes him even worse, in my opinion, is that he's the most required character on story missions after Hunter, which sucks because that means that you're stuck with him. Even if you don't like him, even if you don't want to play him, you're still going to be stuck building him to at least some capacity, which feels dreadful. So I hate this character. Morbius does his job 10,000 times better. And if you disagree with that, I'm sorry, you're just wrong. I don't usually say that, but you're wrong. Morbius is 10,000 times better than Blade. The only thing Blade has going for him now is that, yes, the fact that he can apply bleed innately means that he does interact with revenants and what are they called? Vampires really well. And I would argue that Morbius doesn't enable Blade, but Blade helps enable Morbius, but it's not even necessary because once Morbius is in Bloodlust, you don't need Blade anymore. So yeah, he's just not great. He doesn't do anything. His damage is pitiful without Reaper against a high blood stack character. Uh, Glaive is nice, I'll say. Hunger is good when it works, but it rarely ever works. His quick kind of blows, and a lot of his cards are shit. Like Strike, Relentless, Savage are all pretty bad. So, Stake, like, he's bad. He's a super weak character, and Morbius makes him look like a joke, because he is. And his passive is okay. I guess that's what I mean by he can help enable Morbius. It's with his passive, but Morbius doesn't need it. The blade is just awful. And again, the fact that he's required on the most story missions makes it even worse. Yeah, really not much to say. He's just dreadful. So next up, Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel, I went on a rant about her on my last video, my last tier list video. So I won't go too much into it this time, or I won't do it to the same degree. But she is such an incomplete character. Bloodlust from Morbius is what Binary wishes it could be. Binary only gives 100% offense to Carol, and that sounds like a lot, right? But it's not. She doesn't even do the most damage in Binary. Her cards are all shit without Binary, and they're just decent with Binary. Knee Strike feels terrible. Photon Beam is way too expensive at 3 heroism for what it does. Um, Supernova is one of the weakest AoEs in the game, literally, even in Binary. You have Bring It On is solid, Quick Jab is solid, but then every other card is just ass. Regroup is unplayable. One Step Ahead is super clunky. Um, Cosmic Ray is not good. Rain of Blows is a joke, unless you literally only run it as a finisher, but that's it. Yeah, her cards are just so awful, and Binary does not give her as much damage as you think it does. She still needs things like vulnerability on the enemies or strengthened on her to really shine, and that's in Binary. So it's just a terrible design. It's very, very clunky. She's not very good. It's, yeah, and she's out DPS'd and out tanked by at least 2 characters in both ways. Like Wolverine and Cap tank better than her. Shit, Morbius tanks better than her. And then pick any character in S and A and they do more damage than Carol, except for maybe Captain America. And even then. So she's just awful. She doesn't do anything. She's so weak. She doesn't scale well into high difficulty endgame at all. And her epics are bad, her rares are okay, her commons are bad, her legendary is bad. She's just bad. Her passive is awful too. 20% chance to counter at level 2. Like what? Hello? Never happens. So, God, yeah, she's awful. I always forget how bad vanilla Captain Marvel is compared to, yeah, like she's really bad. I'm telling you guys, she's really bad. Like just look at the numbers and she's bad. And last up, Deadpool. Worst character in the game, bar none. It's not even close. The only thing about him is that he does have quick shot, which is decent, and overpowered is solid. Honestly, like overpowered is a pretty solid card. Deadpool has many problems, but the main ones are that Infuego is far too difficult to generate and maintain. Far too difficult. His cards without Infuego are awful. I mean, I know that's intentional, but they're unplayable. And I mean unplayable. Pain Pinata doing 50% AoE, and you can't get it any higher without mods is ridiculous. Like, I understand it's supposed to be a debuff tool and an Infuego stacker, but it's awful. His ultimate is not that good. His other purple, the hey something face, is not good. His commons are all awful. Like Death from Above is a joke. Pain Pinata is a joke. Altogether now is mediocre, only upgraded. And then yeah, Quick Shot is okay. So, but his Infuego mechanic is far too hard to use, and his cards are way too weak without Infuego. And even with 5 Infuego, the only good cards he has then become Overpowered and Burning Sensation. Every other card is still dog water. Like Death from Above still does pitiful damage at 5 Infuego. Pain Pinata does no damage, so being a bigger AoE is irrelevant. And then, oh, Spread the Love. Oh my god. Spread the Love, I almost forgot, is the worst chain in the game, and it's not even close. Like, it's awful how bad Spread the Love is. The only way it's playable is if you roll either 33% off or no, 50% offense increase or a debuff, and even then it's awful. Um, His missions are bad. Like, he has the worst DLC missions in the game, albeit he has the best DLC research in the game with the food truck. He's just awful. He's awful, and he's so boring. That's the thing. Like, Scarlet Witch isn't very strong, and Nico isn't very strong, but at least they're interesting, you know? Like, at least they've got fun parts of their game plan, there's fun parts to their kit. Deadpool has the laziest animations in the game, behind maybe Morbius. He has the most boring cards in the game that do nothing. His passive does nothing. Like, staying alive passive, I mean. It's awful and counterintuitive to his kit. He has no utility for his team at all. Like, yeah, literally at all. He's supposed to be this high single target damage character. He doesn't even do the most single target damage. Like, he's such a design mess. He's so incomplete. He's so boring. So boring. He does no damage. And Fuego is way too hard to play with. And you can't even maintain it against supervillains without conceal. It's physically impossible. So yeah, I don't know what they were thinking, but he is by and large the worst character in the game. And honestly, I almost wanted to put him on a tier of his own, but this just looked more concise. So uh yeah, there you go. That's my final vanilla tier list. Let's see. A lot of people complain when I put like, Iron Man where he is, Nico where she is, Hulk where he is. I'd say those ones stick out. I've had some people argue with me about Blade and Marvel, but I don't know, guys. After putting hundreds of hours in the vanilla game, the modded game, the balanced decisions of this game, and talking to people about this game, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just saying. Uh, You'd be hard pressed to change my mind on any of these characters full tier. Sure, maybe we can change individual placements, but full tier? Nah, no shot. So, anywho, again, final vanilla tier list for now. You won't get another one from me, and the balance mod doesn't really need one unless they do a balance shift or more content releases one day. Then I'll make another one. Um, Pretty much the balance mod is my sole focus now, and then once that's done, who knows, right? The game is running on life support, and honestly, they've already pulled the plug. So, anywho, hope you guys enjoy, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace for now.